right. So like, I did recognize that. The thing is, I realized that when Drew stepped off stage, that I am exactly dressing in his color scheme. And just so you guys didn't get confused, I'm not one of his dancers. I don't have this like that. Unfortunately, I would be disappointing you guys with instead with a talk about how we can move from from a perfect workspace to a human one. Right, let's get into it. So, there are two car models. These are real car models, yeah? Car model A, car model B. Both, everyone buys them. We're at the forefront of the industry, right? Amazing specs, amazing innovation, amazing technology. But the funny thing is, I know some people who own car B who've driven gas for like 20 years with no problem. I also know people who own car A and give them 5 years and you wouldn't be surprised to see them bend over at the side of the road with a steering hood and $1,000 repair bill. If only this mouse wasn't so vulnerable. Anyway, but before I confuse you guys, this isn't a talk about cars or engineering. This is a talk about how we can move from a perfect workspace to a human, vulnerable, inclusive one. I'm Ernest, and this is my TED Talk. So, why is car B so much more durable? Why does it last so much longer? It's because the engineers that designed it had a design concept in mind called vulnerability. Heard of it? Let's get into it. So what is vulnerability? If you literally look it up on Google, the definition is the extent to which we're exposed to a physical or emotional attack. Oof. Negative, right? Like something we're supposed to minimize, something we're supposed to avoid. So the thing is, vulnerability is actually one of the tools that's leveraged by many of our most celebrated leaders today. And how? That seems counterintuitive. How is opening myself up to vulnerability and attacks and harm the double success in the future? Well, Tua shows us how, in fact, we can take ownership of our vulnerability and turn it from something we perceive as a weakness to a superpower in a good place. But first, I think we need to clear up what vulnerability isn't. Vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability has been biologically hardwired into us for a reason, and it has benefited us in our decision making for millennia. If anyone thinks that vulnerability is a weakness, I humbly challenge one to implement vulnerability in their lives. That means admitting we're not good at something, saying sorry. It's not easy, is it? But today, I'll show us how implementing vulnerability, taking ownership of it, and voicing it is, at the end of the day, so much easier when going against our nature and being the guy that pretends that everything's always okay. So what do we get from vulnerability? We get ruinous. Right. The thing is, vulnerability, by some definitions, means being raw. Because if Lumi put out the picture-perfect, Instagrammable version of ourselves every day, do people really fall in love with us? Or do they fall in love with the person that they want us to be? We have to be prepared to put our genuine selves out there all the time. And yes, that means some people didn't like it. But what it also means is for the people that do like it, we develop so much more meaningful and lasting relationships. I think this is really, really well explained by the car example I had earlier. We see, the engineers of car A gave their new owners a thick manual that would, okay, the car's going to run fine if we refill the oil this often, if we drive it at this certain speed, if we go and service the car every so and so kilometers. But I think we can come and see the issue with that. Right, show of hands. How many of us actually reads the entire instruction manual when we get something in? Just me? Okay, definitely not judging you guys. But the thing is, the engineers of car B understood this. They understood that, well, some people aren't going to read the instruction manual. Well, Some people are going to take hard corners in life, switch lanes quickly, drive too fast, sometimes drive too slow. They understood that no one drives perfect, but people drive like this, and like this. Basically, the engineers had real and imperfect expectations that people are imperfect and that they're going to make mistakes. Similarly, if we have the same expectations of other people, that they aren't going to be perfect, that they're real, that they're genuine, with the chance to develop much more meaningful and long-lasting relationships at the end of the day. So what else do we get from vulnerability? We get innovation. You see, a vulnerable team is a team in which people understand and embrace everyone's individual strengths, but also shortcomings. A team that gets to know each other, that loves each other. This helps teamwork. This helps people delegate responsibilities so much more efficiently. In addition, it creates a space where people feel they can work together and not be part of a who is the best contest. And at the end of the day, it is this environment, the environment in which we create debates and not decisions, where we prioritize open-mindedness over correctness. This is where you get vulnerability, because people aren't afraid to be wrong. As Francis said, people aren't afraid to be weird, and this is where we get the real ideas of innovation. So, if we go back to the definition, we tend to always focus on this word, haunt. Makes us scared, makes us not even want to touch vulnerability in the first place. That we never focus on this other word that I would say is actually more important, possibility. This is because by definition, vulnerability opens us up to possibility. If we are vulnerable enough in our workspace to let other people's ideas shine, to give other people's opinions a chance, we are giving possibilities. Possibilities of failure, of sometimes wasted moment, of embarrassment, yes, but possibilities for growth, possibilities for ideas, possibilities for innovation, possibilities that would have all disappeared if the boss simply said, do it this way, do it that way, which would have sucked up all the emerging ideas out of them. On a side note, who has heard of micromanaging? Raise your hand if you've heard of micromanaging. Right. To those of us that haven't heard of micromanaging, it's basically that manager that's at the back of you erasing, make this a slightly different shade of green. Shift the image 5 millimeters to the right. Rebuild that sentence. So now we know what it is. Raise your hands if you like to be micromanaged. Just Ellie? Well, I'm glad to see that all of us are sane, except for Ellie, of course. And the reason why we're doing that vulnerability is because if people micromanage us, they're not giving our ideas a chance. They don't let us prove that we can do it on our own. But the good news is that vulnerability actually helps us reduce our micromanaging. This is because the vulnerability, we have to make two assumptions. Number one, things aren't always going to go our way. Number two, that sometimes our way isn't necessarily the best way, which I hope isn't news for most of us. This will lead us to trust our team enough to embrace the vulnerability of letting them implement their ideas instead of just our own, and help us to prevent being the controlling dictator that we naturally want to be by our human nature. The thing is, vulnerability also helps us improve our accountability and helps us take more ownership of the task that's at hand. Because the thing is, it shifts the narrative from, oh, I'm just doing what I have to do to earn my paychecks and so I don't get scolded. That if you're vulnerable to letting others put their ideas on the playing field, it changes narrative to, yes, this is my task. It's up to me to make sure this succeeds with the resources that I'm given. According to Liz Wiseman, who is one of the greatest leadership researchers, people feel burnt out, demotivated, not because of the long working hours, not because of the amount of projects they take on. They're demotivated and burnt out because they feel like their work doesn't make a difference. And I know this because I see so many people in my life who don't actually work that many hours and come home every day exhausted. I also knew many people in my life that are great leaders that spend 12 to 18 hours in the workplace, sleep in their office, but they're always full of energy, so lively because they know that they contribute and that they make a difference. So how do we create this for our teammates? Number one, we actually have to let them make a difference. We have to give them a voice, a seat at the table, give weight on their opinion, give them a chance, second chance, third chance. And that's where we get innovation. Number three, vulnerability increases respect. We see, when we open up to people and show them the vulnerable side of us, it makes people feel highly honored and highly respected, as it shows the amount of investment and trust we're willing to put into the relationship. Secondly, we need to be vulnerable enough to embrace the possibility of letting others do it their way, because it respects that they have their own unique perspective, well-known point of view. Number three, be vulnerable reminds us that we make mistakes and that it's okay to be human, because sometimes we forget. So, I think it's very clear how vulnerability can be employed in many ways in the workplace. That begs the question, just how much vulnerability is too much vulnerability? As a fellow TED speaker, Brene Brown said, vulnerability minus boundaries, not vulnerability. This is because vulnerability is an incredibly powerful tool, and it should be used with the intention of increasing understanding in the workspace, of creating a healthier environment, and not to just use our teammates as an emotional punching bag. Healthy vulnerability can sound like, I'm not that good at this. Can someone help? Or, oops, I made a mistake and I own up to it. Unhealthy vulnerability can sound like, oh my goodness, how do I get in this situation? I didn't deserve this job. Clearly difference. So, how do we know for sure whether we're on the healthy or unhealthy side of vulnerability? It's very simple. If we open up to someone and they react like this, you know it's probably fun. But if you open up to someone and they react like this, then you hear one of these, you know that you're probably eating too much, or we have to be a bit nonchalant on that. So, how do we implement vulnerability? First off, don't be a Backstreet Boy, because I Want You, it's an amazing song. It is an absolutely horrible thing to hear in the workplace. Instead of perpetuating this culture of control and dictation, let's give others a chance. Number two, take the L's, take the losses, own up to your losses. And I get it, when something goes wrong, our first instinct is to typically be defensive. But being defensive makes us sound like the guy that misses 10 shots on the basketball hoop and blows it on the limb. Yeah, it's not a good look. So, owning up to your mistakes not only creates a culture of accountability, it creates a growth mindset. Because we go from, I didn't do it, it's your fault, to, not one of my best choices. But how can we learn from this? Number three, understand. And I think this is pretty much the straightforward one. Get to know our teammates. Get value done. Because in this way, our friendship with them is simply based on who they are, on what benefit they bring to the company, not the good hours they put on the table. And additionally, getting to know their boundaries and getting to know what's okay with them helps us to prevent getting reactions like that. Number 4, argue. And no, I don't mean the flipping tables, hurling insults kind. I mean the kind of argument where everyone gets a seat at the table. Everyone gets to share a brand new idea. Everyone gets the chance to show their fresh perspective, the hot take. And that is where we get innovation. Because a good leader isn't the most intelligent person in the room. A good leader is the person in the room that brings the most intelligence out of it. And yeah, a lot of the day, we're reluctant to be vulnerable. We're scared being the first one to be vulnerable in our workspace. And I get it, because so many of us are being conditioned to believe that we should never do that, myself included. Then the next time we'll sit in a car and enjoy the route, be sure to thank the engineers because they were definitely being vulnerable. Thank you.